Hi, Mickey.
Hey, Bob.
Oh, look, it's a picture of Barry Weiss. You know, I just approvingly retweeted her, something I thought I'd never do.
I know. I didn't expect that from you. Everybody's being a big person. That's a very big of you. And it's big of her to tweet this thing criticizing Elon Musk for banning these accounts, which seems to be the story of the hour, maybe not of next hour, but
not to not to harsh your buzz or Barry's, but is it big of her, or is it just a sign of the extent to which the tide has turned against Elon Musk? Has the tide so turned that it is in her interest to position herself at some distance from him? I mean, maybe we should read the tweet in case people haven't.
Maybe we should recap what's happened for people.
Okay. Anyway, well, just quickly, her tweet that I approvingly retweeted is the old regime at Twitter governed by its own whims and biases, and it sure looks like the new regime has the same problem. I oppose it in both cases, and I think those journalists who were reporting on a story of public importance should be reinstated. Of course, Barry Weiss is one of two court scribes for, to put it maybe more cynically than it should be put, for Elon Musk, the other being Matt Taibbi. They're both doing this Twitter files thing. He's trusted them to tell his story about the old regime. Now she's distancing herself from him. Now go ahead and provide whatever back.
No, well, that's why it took some balls for her to do it, I think, because he has favored her with this treasure trove of documents, and which has certainly been good for her visibility and good for her new publication. And yet she is standing up to this guy who did this big favor for her. And yes, I think I don't think the tide is irrevocably turned against Musk. What happened is, I'm going to get this wrong because I only recently boned up on it, but my impression is that he suspended this guy who runs Elon Jet, which uses mainly publicly available information to track his jet and report his whereabouts,
and has for a long time, I gather.
Yeah. Right, but he had promised he wouldn't ban it. But then he changed his mind. Apparently, after he claims the car carrying his kid was accosted by a stalker who jumped on the hood, and this scared him. And I think the secret is that maybe it also scared the child's mother, who lent on Elon, saying, "You have to stop this." There's often a woman behind the scenes, as in the Will Smith case, spurring action that may not be right, or may be right. Anyway, so he then also banned a whole bunch of credentialed journalists and some uncredentialed ones who were linking to this guy's account on the grounds that they too were publicizing this information, and they've gone berserk and said, we're only just reporting the story. Why can't we just link to this public information? And I would say that the tide is definitely against Musk, although he put a poll on his site: should we reinstate these people immediately? And even though it's presumably a self-selected audience of Musk fans,
quite so,
he's losing. So I think the obvious denouement of this episode is he looks at the polls and says, "Okay, Vox Populi," and reinstates them.
Yeah, but this isn't. This is not the whole reason the tide is turning. He's had a bad week. And, I think I think he did much more clearly egregious things over the weekend, one in particular, almost a week ago now. And those are apparently not unrelated to the fact that his stock tanked for the first couple of days of the week. And the Wall Street Journal did a story on Tuesday saying big-time stockholders in Tesla are complaining that he's an absentee CEO, and they're complaining about how he's conducting himself on Twitter. Now, and I want to get into one of those things because I think it is so egregious and has gotten not enough attention. It's kind of gotten some, or one aspect of it has gotten some, but I think people really haven't reckoned with what a horrible and irresponsible person he's showing himself to be. Now, but before I get to that, just to make sure I'm clear about this. So I hadn't seen that this guy supposedly jumped on the hood of his car. Has that been documented? I saw a video where the guy in question who supposedly was stalking his son was sitting in a car doing a video with his smartphone of whoever was videoing him. And I gather Elon was saying that I don't know what the connection between the jet tracker and this guy being near his son was, unless Elon is saying he had just gotten off a jet, but people geolocated the car and said, no, it's nowhere near an airport. And then somebody said, well, it's not that far from a heliport. I have no idea. Is there, how much we know about that?
It was in South Pasadena, I think.
So we know that this guy actually jumped on the hood of the car?
We know that Elon said something close to that in his I'm getting it now, but he said the guy did more than sit in a car.
Well, it doesn't matter. Don't spend time. I mean, whatever. These elite journalists who he got rid of for the time being, at least include New York Times, Washington Post. It's and the editor of the Washington Post has complained. And
I have the Elon link here. Last night, a car carrying little X, that's his son, in LA was followed by a crazy stalker thinking it was me, who later blocked car from moving and climbed onto hood.
Mm-hmm.
Legal action is being taken against Sweeney, that's the Elon Jets guy, and organizations who supported harm to my family.
Okay.
That's what the tweet said.
Anyway, I don't know if there's a connection to the Jets, but look, if there is, I mean, I'd say I can understand how, if you're in his position, your son's endangered, you think it's connected to the jet thing. But that's not when it started. He had already banned this guy, hadn't he? The jet guy before this latest thing, right? I think he had. Don't look that up. We don't have time.
I think he had. I just look at the research.
But
December 14th.
Yeah. So anyway, whatever. I mean, one thing I would say though is remember their big reveal about the Trump banning in the course of the Twitter files on January 8th of 2021 was that behind closed doors, they had said, I don't think our terms of service, at least some executives had said, I don't think our terms of service really warrant banning him. And they went ahead and banned him anyway. And of course, my line has been that, well, they should have focused on the January 6th tweet where he endangered the life of the vice president. And in any event, just more broadly, they shouldn't have felt bound by the terms of service. Okay. What they should have done, you with us, Mickey?
Yeah.
Are you like one of these young people who can be texting on a phone and actually listening to what's being said?
I'm not texting. I'm just looking for what David Sachs said about this.
About what? The car, the plane? None of that matters.
The whole controversy.
But of course the one I'm talking about? No, I'm talking about a different one now. Okay, I'm talking about the Twitter files. I just think they should have said, look, screw the terms of service. We had not anticipated that a sitting president would use Twitter to not just endanger the life of the vice president, but encourage people to coercively impede the counting of the votes the electoral votes in a presidential election, and more broadly, subvert democracy, subvert the Constitution. We just didn't anticipate this when we wrote our terms of service. So screw them. We're banning the guy. That's a totally legit thing. And I just want to say that's what Elon is doing now. And fine, the Twitter terms of service don't say you can't geolocate jets and put it on your site. And he is entitled to say those terms were written before Twitter was owned by a billionaire who owns a jet. Now they're changed. Fine. But that's exactly that's what he's doing. And that's exactly what Twitter, if they had had any sense, would have said when they banned Trump. In any event, it's the functional equivalent of what happened with banning Trump.
That's a good point. That's a good point. He's making it up as he goes along. And this is a rule that he made up. So the question is it a crazy rule that is a disaster for him? And it is a disaster in this sense, which is the key thing that what could destroy Twitter is if all the journalists leave. That they are a big attraction for Twitter. There's other kinds of Twitter. There's Black Twitter, there's probably crochet Twitter, there's car Twitter, there's teen Twitter, there's porn Twitter. But for like people who are interested in it as a public discourse, the reason it is important is because the big shots in journalism who actually do help shape the narrative that everybody else sees, even if they're not on Twitter, are on Twitter and have felt they have to be on Twitter. And politicians are on Twitter and feel they have to be on Twitter. If you know, as I said before, if Maggie Haberman and the Washington Post leave, you know, it's all over for me too, probably. Or I'll go to wherever she goes, you know?
You'll go wherever Maggie goes?
I'll go where Maggie goes, I will go. Yes. So it was really, it's extraordinarily dangerous for him to have done this. Even if he's wrong. Even if he's right. I
think Twitter's, you know, strategically critical elite base goes somewhat beyond journalists in the New York Times sense and beyond journalists. I mean, look, there's VC Twitter. That's, you know, there's like business Twitter. There's academic Twitter. And it all kind of works in synergy, right?
Yeah,
because,
right. I agree.
But if you're right that if it starts unraveling, and look, I had said from the beginning, months ago, Elon taking over Twitter is going to be a test of the strength of network effects. It's very hard because of network effects for people to leave Twitter. But I didn't think he would put it to this severe test. Right. And I'm starting to think I'm starting to see ways it could unravel.
Well, I agree. This is the first time you could see everybody going to post. Apparently, the backlog is being cut, and you can actually get on post now. Mm-hmm. So maybe everybody will go to post. I mean, it's always possible.
I'm starting to think, I can get into this in the Parrot Room. I'm starting to see a way Mastodon could actually be the thing. Well, no, but you see, its weakness is its strength in a certain sense. But let me get to the thing. See, just to be clear, the reason Elon's stock has, well, go ahead and say what you're going to say.
This is what David Sachs, our friend David Sachs, said about the events of the week. Elon's content moderation decisions so far, no swastikas, no continuous real-time doxing. What's the problem? And it is true, you know, even if it wasn't continuous real-time doxing, it is true that it is a limited number of relatively discrete categories. And, you know, don't piss off Elon by linking to Elon Jets, okay? Mm-hmm. You can do that and still have a viable political discourse. So that's a point of possible, you know, survival of Twitter as a viable medium, despite this. As I said, it's a limited group. It's a limited group.
As I said, the reason he's in trouble is not just because of this jet thing, and it's not just because he banned these journalists. It starts a long time ago. What? Suspended, whatever.
For 7 days.
Right. Over the weekend, and it starts before even this. But he did a couple of things that got a lot of attention, pissed a lot of people off. I still don't think people have really focused on the key thing from the most egregious thing from my point of view. So the two things were, there's this what's his name, Yoel Roth, the former content guy, the former trust and safety guy at Twitter. Elon, you know, they now have a spat. For a while, Roth was sticking around and Elon was saying kind things about him. Then he left. And Elon goes and takes out of context something he wrote in, I don't know, it was a dissertation or something that I haven't even seen the passage, but I gather it makes him sound like he's supporting pedophilia or some weird thing about, and in fact, the upshot apparently of that dissertation was we need to find a way to keep young people from being exploited and abused by Grindr, that app, you know, that was and probably is widely used in the gay community.
I don't quite know how you have a safer Grindr. Did people go on, they meet each other, but they don't have sex?
This was about the specific problem of young people. Okay, I haven't read it. My point is, apparently, Elon, you know, he's done this before. He's got a thing about pedophilia. He accused some guy he had no knowledge of whatsoever, who was in Thailand, I think, at the time, of being a pedophile. And then when people challenged him, this is, of course, like a couple of years ago, he says, well, doesn't he look like a pedo to you? It's like he's got a weird, I mean, he's a weird guy in so many ways, but he's got a thing about this. So he takes this out of context. And of course, some of the crazier people in the Elon hordes apparently accost Roth, just very much the way Elon is complaining that people are doing to him now. And they do it because Elon took this thing out of context on Twitter. He's got over 100 million followers, so he shouldn't do these things lightly. And Roth had to relocate, leave his residence. Okay, at least he says he felt that besieged. Okay, this pissed a lot of people off. The other thing that pissed a lot of people off was the Fauci thing. Now, the part of that I think people remember is when he says, Elon just says, out of the blue, here are my pronouns, prosecute Fauci. I mean, what a totally vapid joke by way of trying to, I guess, appeal to both kind of anti-trans or trans skeptics or anti-woke and the anti-Fauci community, just out of nowhere. Okay.
Well, he's got a lot of lame jokes up his sleeve.
Okay. But here's the worst.
Remember his cars are named Model S, E, X, and Y. Right.
No, he's a child in so many ways. But here's the bad part is he subsequently says in a tweet, Fauci, quote, lied to Congress and funded gain of function research that killed millions of people. He has accused Fauci of being responsible for the deaths of millions of people. First of all, that increases the chances that somebody's going to kill Fauci, just as what he did endangered this Roth guy, and just as he's complaining about people doing with him.
But that you can't refrain. I mean, this is different from Roth. Roth was not a important national public figure, and it sort of faded from the story and was behaving relatively responsibly. There was no reason for him to make, to say that stuff about Roth. Fauci, this is like a central issue of contention. Was there gain of function research?
No, it's not. No, it's not.
Funded? Yes,
no, it's not. I'll explain the thing as I understand it, okay? Okay. Now, remember, he's not just saying he funded gain of research stuff at Wuhan. He's saying he funded gain of research stuff at Wuhan that killed millions of people. And by the way,
it escaped from the lab.
No. Let me explain what the actual truth about all of this is. Okay. Famously, Rand Paul and Fauci got into this dispute in Congress about whether there had been gain of function research at Wuhan that was supported by the NIH or something, by the federal government. Okay. Now, I think it was kind of a semantic disagreement. And I think if Fauci was technically correct that there hadn't been, it was because NIH had defined gain of function research so narrowly. But what everyone agrees about, all scientists agree about, so far as I know, is that the specific thing they were talking about is not the COVID virus, okay? This could not have possibly led to COVID. Now, separately, there is a suspicion that at the Wuhan lab, there was gain of function research that led to the COVID virus as we know it, okay? But not only is there no evidence that Fauci had anything to do with that the federal government had anything to do with that, we know that Wuhan, in conjunction with some American people, had actually applied to the DARPA at the Pentagon, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, for funding to do that. The grant had been denied. Okay. Now, Wuhan may have gone ahead and done it. I think there's a good chance of that. And I think that COVID may be a genetically engineered virus. But the Rand Paul thing is separate. Nobody thinks that was the COVID virus. And there's no evidence that Fauci okayed gain of research stuff on the COVID virus. And when you think about it, it's implausible, right? Because Fauci is, if nothing else, a bureaucratic survivor. And if DARPA rejects a grant, the idea that Fauci is going to say, hey, you know what I'd like to do is just do this thing secretly and illicitly in a way that could ruin my career if somebody finds out. Fauci is totally not the kind of guy to do that. But leave aside whether you agree with me that it's implausible. Elon Musk is making the totally unfounded claim that Fauci is responsible for killing millions of people by virtue of funding gain of function research. Okay.
My impression is from that article in the Spectator, written by Matt Ridley's partner, is a very good article because it sort of summarizes. It's sort of the only article you have to read. Maybe it's not, but it summarizes the whole controversy. Was that there are now a lot of leakers from the Eco Health Alliance, and I'm not completely sure what you just said is true. I think there may have been some eco
who have
health
implicated Fauci, who have said Fauci okayed gain of function research on the thing that became the COVID virus.
It wouldn't have said that, but it would have opened the door to the fact that Eco Health might have used some funding to fund some gain of function research on the COVID virus. It's been a week since I read this article. I'm just not completely sure that what you say is right.
Well, I mean,
all I can say.
Musk needs to back up what he's saying. And it's, unless there's something I'm completely unaware of, it's completely unfounded. There's a natural conflation of these two issues with gain of function, but they're separate issues. And I don't know, there's something weird about me. There's all this stuff that I think, that freaks me out that doesn't freak other people out, that I get outraged about, that other people don't get outraged about. I just think if you're going to publicly accuse, and I don't give a shit if he's a public official, if you're going to publicly accuse someone, assert confidently. And by the way, you can tell by the phrasing that Musk is conflating these two. He says he lied to Congress. That's a reference to the Rand Paul encounter, and funded gain of research that killed millions of people. So he's conflating these two things. But to get back to my outrage, if you're going to accuse someone confidently of being responsible for the deaths of millions of people, you better fucking have your shit together and be able to tell us what you mean.
I mean, I can't say that when Robert McNamara was alive, I couldn't say he's responsible for the deaths of millions of people because somebody might attack him as somebody almost did.
No, if you can back it up,
McNamara.
Mickey, this isn't that complicated. If you can back it up, say it. And if you can't, don't. No, if you can't, don't.
If you can't, you shouldn't say it, even if you're not endangering them.
So you are saying that even if Musk has zero evidence of this, it's not outrageous that he tweets it to 100 million
it might trigger
people,
that it might trigger somebody attacking somebody. I guess it makes the stakes higher for getting it right, but it's this business of attacking Fauci on the street that you brought up. Seems to me you shouldn't say it if it's wrong, whether or not they're going to attack Fauci on the street.
Well,
I'm soft on Fauci. I don't particularly have a beef with him. I think he was probably doing what he thought was right.
This has nothing to do with Fauci at all. I mean, you can just substitute any human being and say, should a billionaire who owns Twitter, so can't get kicked off, and has 100 million followers, tweet to them confidently that any given person, especially somebody that there's already a lot of pent-up hatred toward, is responsible for killing millions of people when there's absolutely no foundation for it. And you're saying fine, as I understand it, right? You're saying it's okay.
I think you should back it up. I'm just not sure that he can't back it up enough to make it permissible. I don't know.
Well, somebody should do it for him. I had exchanges with people on Twitter about this, asking them, like, what does he mean? What, can you back it up? And I don't think so. I looked it up.
His Tesla shareholders should be happy. He obviously spent all of 10 seconds on this, so it didn't really distract him from his Tesla stewardship duties.
But back to the original point, this thing, the anti-Elon animus really gained momentum over the weekend. And honestly, I think if I knew all the facts about the jet thing, I might wind up not outraged at all. I mean, if they knew about his son's location because he had just come from some heliport, and they knew about that because of the jet tracking and so on, I totally understand. I still think he shouldn't, it's so parallel to what Twitter did with Trump that Musk should now have limited grounds for freaking out about that. But still,
that's a good point about Trump. If they're making it up as they go along, then Twitter could have made it up as they go along. Unfortunately, they had this bureaucracy that felt it had to promulgate rules and, have some sort of systematic treatment of people. The flight thing gets complicated because apparently most of the data is public, but there's some other little bit of data that the guy had to figure out which of several planes of that type was Musk's. It was not public information. Apparently, he figured it out correctly. So there's that little wrinkle. And the other point to be made is I don't think it's enough that something is public information. In general, the rule of it's public, you should be able to publish it. But remember when I think it was The Nation published an article on how to make a hydrogen bomb. Their point was, and there was a huge fuss about it, and it was a really good article. It was eye-opening, but it probably did make it a little easier for somebody to make a hydrogen bomb. And it was public in the sense that they found it in a public library at some defense lab. But there's a difference between something being formally public and being, on Twitter where millions of people can read it. And I think that's a factor. So it's not dispositive that something is public, but probably in this case, everybody knows that flights are public. And if he wants to disguise his identity, there are ways that rich people do it. They take net jets. They can do other things. So at some point, the responsibility is on him to take care of his own privacy.
Yeah, I mean, one could, I suppose. But I'm less clear on that. I'm also less clear. Somebody was saying that Twitter was deleting. They suspended I think kind of the official Mastodon account, and somebody said they were deleting links to Mastodon. That's almost hard to believe, but it was a credible person who said it. But I don't know. One quick thing, lest I be too high on Barry Weiss. There was a good piece by Eric Levitz, who I think is very good in New York magazine, called "The Twitter Files" is what it claims to expose, referring to which of her Twitter threads was it? Anyway, her big reveal on that was, and I want to ask you about the shadow banning stuff. That was the shadow banning thread. And in a way, the most kind of powerful single tweet in that thread was her saying that Twitter had said they don't do this, and it turns out that they did. Here's her tweet. This was who is it? Charlie Kirk? Is that the guy who was shadow banned? Is that his name?
He's one of them. Charlie Kirk, Dan Bongino, and that doctor. Are the three examples she
Stanford
had.
doctor or something?
Yeah.
So she writes, Twitter denied that it does such things, meaning shadow banning. In 2018, Twitter's Vijaya Gadde, then head of legal policy and trust, and Kayvon Bakpour, head of product, said, quote, "We do not shadow ban." They added, "And we certainly don't shadow ban based on political viewpoints or ideology." Well, Eric Levitz pointed out that if you go to the blog, the Twitter blog post, where she got that "we do not shadow ban" quote, which she didn't link to the post, and maybe now we know why, but it clearly defines shadow banning in a way that gets them off the hook. Now, you can argue that they're defining it in this narrowly so that they can keep themselves off the hook. Fine.
Yeah.
But look, Barry Weiss took the quote from, it's the first sentence of the third paragraph. And here are the first two paragraphs of that post, and she must have read them. It says, "People are asking us if we shadow ban. We do not. But let's start with, what is shadow banning? The best definition we found is this: deliberately making someone's content undiscoverable to everyone except the person who posted it, unbeknownst to the original poster." So by that definition, and they elaborate on that,
I think that's Jack's definition, not PJ Gadde. But anyway.
No, let me be clear. It's the definition that Barry Weiss was referencing. This is the Twitter post from which she took the quote, "We do not shadow ban." And Eric Levitz said, he thought she was lying. She could be sloppy enough to have done this, but she's one of the other, sloppy or dishonest.
I think she was making the argument. I think she was making the argument that Twitter basically denied everything, and they had this, so that and if they had a weird definition of shadow banning, that was part of their disingenuous effort to deny everything when they were in fact doing something.
No, she didn't say that. She could have said that. She could have said this. They were relying on an absurdly narrow definition. She acted as if she says Twitter denied that it does such things, does what it did to these people. But if you look at their post, which was, I guess, before they had done it to these people, it was so narrow as to give them a loophole.
Well, they didn't commit perjury, but they gave the impression that they don't do such things. Jack also said he doesn't censor articles, which is a lot harder for him to get around. Arguably, Barry Weiss did not reference the specific shadow banning questions when she said that. Deny they do such things. Well, Jack said they don't censor articles, and this was arguably censoring articles. So it seems to me Barry Weiss has a leg to stand on that doesn't require her lying. It's just that, it's an argument over what censoring means. I don't think there's a special narrow definition of censorship on the Twitter site or in their testimony. Censorship means censorship.
I'm not talking about censorship at all. I'm not talking about what you're talking about. I'm talking about her tweet about shadow banning.
No, the tweet doesn't say shadow banning. It says this. Deny this. This is arguably censorship.
Now, here's what it says. Twitter denied that it does such things. And here's
such things. There you go.
She goes on to back it up. She says in 2018, they said, quote, "We do not shadow ban," unquote. They added, quote, "And we certainly don't shadow ban based on political viewpoints or ideology," unquote. That's all she's talking about. Eric Levitt's got this right. I looked at it carefully, and that's all I'm talking about.
Yeah, but he also, right after shadow ban, he also denied censoring. She picked the wrong part of their testimony to quote back at them, and with that, she probably didn't want to. I don't know. Maybe she was sloppy. Maybe she was rushed. Maybe she didn't understand that they had this narrow definition of shadow banning. Do you realize how narrow their definition of shadow banning is?
Yeah, it's narrow.
I thought their definition of shadow banning was they prevent you from being searched. They prevent you from being linked to. But if somebody goes to your site, Bob Wright, they will see the tweet.
Right.
That's not their definition of shadow banning. Their definition is even narrower. Wait, their definition of shadow banning is nobody can see it ever. You're tweeting into the void.
Right. Now,
it's unbelievable.
I know. They explicitly say that. They say
not quite. They say not discoverable.
They say no. They go on to say, and what I didn't quote, we're defining it so narrowly that even if you go to, I'm pretty sure of this, they say what you said. Now, I'm not sure actually that in the case of like Charlie Kirk, they said they gave him a do not amplify label. I assume that means that he doesn't get any advantage out of the algorithm, right? I assume that means that any of his followers who click see latest tweets, one of the two options, will see his tweets. So I don't think they were relying on that narrow definition in that case. But you're right. They define it in almost absurdly narrow fashion. And if Barry Weiss wants to complain about that, she can. But she misrepresented it. She didn't.
Right. But the bigger picture is they were doing things to fuck up these people, and they had no business doing it. And so I just think this is all little of a excessive reaction against a bit of a shortcut she took.
I agree that they should be completely transparent about shadow banning, about what your status is. And if you get suspended, they should tell you why. What tweet was it? Right. There needs to be a complete overhaul of this. Musk has said he will do it. I support that. I'm just saying that, if you're going to be anointed by Twitter as revealing the awful truth about this stuff, you should get things straight. When she says Twitter denied it does such things, Twitter never denied that they never do a do not amplify thing.
Yes, they do. They deny they censor. The question is, do not amplifying censorship? I would say yes, it is. They denied they censored. Well, I wouldn't convict Jack of perjury on that, but I would make him walk the hot coals and explain the ways he thinks this isn't censorship.
I assume censorship means deleting tweets without, I don't know, but anyway, that's not what she's relying on here. And
whether or not she relies on the right thing, her basic point, which is that they deny doing such things, is true. They gave every impression that they didn't do such things, and they did do such things. That's the big point. And the larger point, which nobody is addressing, is they have focused on, I think I made this point last week, but they have focused only on the top of the pyramid, the big shots like Dan Bongino and the Stanford doctor,
right,
and Charlie Kirk's. What people like me worry about is, was the algorithm pervasively biased against conservatives and in favor of liberals? And it could have just been unconsciously pervasively biased. There's a very interesting line of tweets that Musk sort of referred to and just said, this is interesting, by somebody named Ruby something, which she got a trove of documents from inside Twitter about how it actually runs. And the algorithm runs on machine learning, okay? And so we know that machine learning can be biased in terms of what you feed machine learning, and what you say is, it looks for election denial, and it looks for people who use certain keywords that like, for example, the movie 2000 Mules, they found that people who used the word 2000 Mules were likely to be election deniers. So they fed that into the machine learning, and it gave people points off if they use 2000 Mules. So it's obvious where bias could have been creeped in. And then there were people called agents internally who had the power to ban people, not just at the top, but throughout. And that's the key issue. We have to learn a whole lot more. And Musk has the power to tell us a whole lot more about how this damn algorithm works.
Well, I assume they will, and they should. I mean, you have said in the past you think you were shadow banned. It's not quite impossible that I was. I certainly don't feel like I get much traction on Twitter. What?
Under my definition of shadow banning, yeah, what they call visibility filtering, yes.
Which is like a do not amplify thing.
It's a bunch of different tools they have. Do not amplify, they ban you from search results. And I can't believe they don't have a dial that says, do we amplify Bob 100% or do we amplify him 50%? They dial it down to 50%.
You think it should be a more continuous filter, or you would expect a more continuous gradation?
I would expect they would be smart enough to have gradations, yes.
Now, but I think for them to have this nominal connection between the rules and the punishment, they actually need to break it up into several discrete things. But anyway, look, they should, and I assume they will, and I assume they can, give us a list of everyone who has ever had any kind of filter applied to them over in the history of Twitter. That should be out there. And I support that.
Okay. I agree. That's a big thing.
Well, it's just obvious. I mean, yeah. But it gets back to it's just, this has not, I don't think either Matt Taibbi or Barry Weiss, I just think they both kind of slanted the story in ways that lead me to not trust their rendering of things.
Well, Taibbi went out of his way to say there was no evidence of government involvement.
Yeah, but
he didn't have to say that. That was.
But the thing, I want to add something to last week's critique. So again, he said, well, when people in the Biden camp brought things to their attention, they were attended to. When people in Trump's camp did, but because Trump people were less well connected, they got, it didn't work as effectively for them. And then, as I said, he gives you the example of the Biden people saying, the screenshot of the email where they say, oh, the Biden people sent this in, I'm on it. And he doesn't give us something from Trump that can be circulated. But the thing I realized, and you and I agreed that on that Biden screenshot, the 3 URLs that the Biden people brought to his attention were actually plainly, they were dick pics, plain violations of terms of service. The only thing I'm adding this week is Taibbi should have pointed that out. Maybe he didn't know it, but anybody would have looked at this and thought, oh man, they get special treatment. Whereas in fact, the Biden people were bringing to their attention something that they would have deleted if anybody had brought it to their attention. And Taibbi didn't say that.
I think he was using what evidence he had. And the problem with that first string of tweets he wrote, those were the ones that were vetted by James Baker, the former FBI agent,
that could be,
who was at the center of this thing, and maybe he cut out all the good stuff. Who knows?
I'm just saying Taibbi should have told us what he could have known. He can look up those URLs.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure. I can't believe he didn't.
Then all the more reason he should have told us what they were.
He should have told us. I agree. Anyway,
So should we switch topics and save any? There's more Musk talk for the Parrot Room, including how, God, it's already been 40 minutes. My alarm's going off. Including how I think it could unravel, like what alternative there could be. Can I quickly say something about Ukraine?
He's launching blue check reform too. That's always exciting for our listeners.
I want to discuss that in the Parrot Room because I'm wondering if I should buy one. I think I may for experimental purposes and see if it helps.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, Ukraine.
Just quickly, I've been making this argument. I wrote this Washington Post piece a couple weeks ago. Basically said, if you look at the likely future of the war, chances are, in retrospect, we in Ukraine will wish they had tried to get a peace deal now. Now, maybe they couldn't get one. Maybe the Russians aren't up for it. But I would say, first of all, if you look at the last couple of weeks, Ukraine wins some battles here, Russia here, little tiny village things. But it seems to me on balance, Russia has made more progress than Ukraine has. Meanwhile, Russia, again, as we mentioned last week, is building these extensive defensive fortifications that make it are going to make it hard for Ukraine to go beyond them. But more than that, I listened to this conversation between this guy Douglas McGregor, and of course, he's controversial. He was a Trump advisor, either formal or informal. He was a colonel in the Army, and he's definitely got kind of an attitude, but he's also definitely extremely smart and knows a lot of stuff about military history. And I assume he's well-versed on Ukraine. And it was a conversation with this guy named Michael Vlahos. And it's the first, I'm talking about the first of 3 conversations on YouTube. I would just say, anybody who feels confident that all it's going to take is more time for Ukraine to push all the way back to the February borders or even the 2014 borders, at least listen to that conversation because it's kind of terrifying. He speaks with such confidence. It's like the Russians are prepared, and these numbers should get your attention in any event, whether you buy his entire analysis or not. Basically, the upshot of what he's saying, the conventional wisdom in the military is that if you're going to do offense, you need a 3-to-1 troop advantage, okay? Well, There is a 3-to-1 troop advantage. Unfortunately, it's 3-to-1 in favor of the Russians, okay? Ukraine's total number of men in arms, as I understand what he's saying, if he's right, is about as many comparable to what Russia has currently in battle, in the battle zone. But in addition to that, apparently Russia has 500,000 troops more or less poised to enter Ukraine or to enter the battle zone from some part of Ukraine that's not currently in battle. And
I read that British intelligence had concluded that Russia does not have enough troops to launch any offensive action in the near future, like for the winter. So they're going to be completely defensive for the winter.
Well, I would,
and maybe in the pipeline there are more troops, but they aren't there now.
I would assume that that's consistent with them building these fortifications. I've heard that analysis. They're going to hunker down for the winter, and they're continue to get their shit together, and then presumably after the muddy season, or maybe before that, they're going to launch a huge offensive. But when you hear McGregor describe what they're going to do, it's terrifying. And I would just say that, now you could say, well, if they're going to do this, they're not going to be in a mood to talk peace. I wouldn't be so sure. I think Putin has by now figured out that these things carry risk. And I'm not sure how supportive the Russian population is. And I would imagine that he's ambivalent about launching an operation that big, given the fact that America probably will respond with more and more powerful weapon systems. And
I just go by what Khrushchev's daughter said, which is he wants out, but he wants to go out on a note of winning something. A big offensive would give him that note.
Well, I think at minimum, he'd like a small offensive. I mean, in the Donbass, I think that's the concern, is that he won't talk peace until they have all of Luhansk and Donetsk or something. But anyway. So why don't you make me feel less guilty about how much I've talked by just saying random shit for a few minutes before we sign off about whatever you want.
No, well, we have we have things to talk about. All sorts of things got pushed into the Parrot Room now, which will be very exciting for Parrot Room listeners. How the world is conspiring to screw up Mickey's life because just when he thought it was safe to stop paying attention to Washington because the amnesty deals have all been killed, A, there's another amnesty deal, and B, the child tax credit is still alive.
I was thinking, it sounds like we're going to get by with immigration, but at least there's no child tax credit.
And take your eye off the ball and you get into trouble. There's Samuel Bankman-Fried.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of new news about him. There's a lot of new news about him, but a little bit of new news that's interesting. There's fusion power.
Yeah, I can talk about that.
And my big question is, does fusion power mean we can stop worrying about climate change because we're all going to have fusion power in the future? So
I can answer that
question. Fire up that gas guzzler. Okay, you can answer it.
I can answer that question because we have an item about it in today's Nonzero newsletter. We also have one about the artificial intelligence, so-called alignment problem. I want to talk about an interesting Scott Alexander post about how ChatGPT should terrify us with respect to the so-called alignment problem.
I don't even know what the alignment problem is, so I look forward to it. You telling me what it is?
Oh, it's like AI. It's like HAL in 2001 or The Matrix or something. Or those are the hyper dramatic versions of it.
Okay, there's will China has unbelievably, these demonstrations were very successful. China's completely changed its COVID policy, and other nations are worrying that now, as COVID explodes, there'll be bad consequences, and we'll get into what those bad consequences are.
Okay.
There's another problem with AI that was flagged by somebody else, and there's the attack on TikTok, which is actually getting some traction.
Okay,
they had a big success this last week.
And I want to talk about. I saw a documentary called it's either MLK FBI or FBI MLK. Anyway, about Martin Luther King and the FBI's campaign against him. I learned some things I didn't know. I want to, AI alignment. I'll talk about some more Elon stuff, his self-driving Tesla problems and why I think he may be courting more trouble in general than he realizes even now. I do want to talk about SBF. And that's probably roughly enough. It's at patreon.com/Parrot Room. And it will be available by the time you're done listening with this, pretty much. And listening to this, the holiday announcement. So next Friday, which is the day before Christmas Eve, we will not be here, but only a few days later, we will have our special year-end edition where we celebrate how on target my predictions were in last year's year-end edition. Was that the way you were planning to spend the year-end edition, Mickey?
I don't think it should be all predictions, but
No, it's not. But I did make one good prediction last year.
No wonder we're focusing on predictions. Never mind.
And so that'll appear, I think, midweek, in between Christmas and New Year's. And
we should have some awards bullshit too, no?
Yeah, we should give awards. Give Barry Weiss the Courage Award, and you'll give it to her, and I will contest it. And what else? So now we go to the Parrot Room where I express remorse over having gotten so revved up in the public podcast, which is the usual. Opening Parrot Room ritual.
One thing about Barry Weiss is she obviously has a lot of donors who are giving her a lot of money, and maybe it's, rather than being a profiling courage, she was getting right with her actual donors.
No,
she may have been saying exactly what she thought, which is what I think.
No, actually, this strengthens the argument for the Courage Award. First of all, they're not donors; they're investors. It's an actual company. But one of them, one of the investors, as they've both been transparent about, is David Sachs, a close Elon associate who could wind up being CEO of Twitter or something. So if anything,
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
So if anything, it took more courage for her to create some space between her and Elon. So, as always, I say that Barry Weiss is a fine American.
Good for Barry.
All right. See you in the Parrot Room.